What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Another video means another dopamine high, except the bicep and the feel something. But today we're not doing a review. We're doing something a little bit different. I'm actually caught up in everything that I need to review. So it's time to work on more experimental type videos, because that was something I did want to start doing more in the great year of 2024. And for today's video, we are doing a video talking about Jazwares' Halo, the Spartan Collection, a toy line that I basically have lived rent-free in my head that I just can't stop thinking about. As you know, that I really like covering these figures, and so much so that I did a huge video essay about my overall thoughts on the two latest waves that took me 3 months and drove me absolutely insane to make, but I eventually got it out. And here we are with another Spartan Collection video that totally won't drive me fucking crazy. But unlike the last video where, I just talk about a bunch of releases that we've already seen, I want to talk about the future of the Spartan Collection. And I don't mean like, we hear some news straight from Jazwares, because honestly, I don't think anyone has any kind of news from Jazwares, because Jazwares isn't really like acknowledging the Halo line for whatever reason. I mean, like, seriously, if you go to the Jazwares website, the only Spartan Collection figure on there is a figure from Wave 1. And when you go to Twitter, they do acknowledge Wave 7 2 months after it released. And if you know the war stories, by the time they made that tweet, no Wave 7 figures were on shelves and they were impossible to find. So today's video is going to be a little more laid back. I'm just going to talk about what I'd like to see from the future figures of the Spartan Collection, what I'd like to see from future accessories, figure predictions, and just figures I'd overall like to see enter the Spartan Collection. And one of my main goals with this video is to kind of be a conversation piece for the fans of the Spartan Collection and kind of, talk about what we want to see as a whole from Jazwares. So if there's any changes to the Spartan Collection that you want to see from Jazwares, or any figures you want to see enter the Spartan Collection, you're more than welcome to go down in the comment section below, get a conversation started. I'll most likely reply to y'all's comments because I like talking about this stuff, like, obviously. And I do want to give a heads up, if you couldn't tell by how many videos I've made about the Spartan Collection, I love this toy line. So there's a lot of ideas I've had brewing in my head. So this video, I'm going to be throwing a lot at y'all. So hopefully y'all are here for the ride and, enjoy what I have to say. So with all that said, let's get to ranting. So let's start off with what I want to see from future figures in the Spartan Collection. And what I mean by this is what I want to see improved via, visuals and articulation, and just basically talking about the base build of the figures. So when it comes to articulation, Wave 7 and 8 did improve the knee and elbow articulation, granting those figures greater range and allowing them the ability to be positioned in some more lively poses. This being said, and with those two areas of articulation now being improved, that only leaves one area I definitely believe needs some improvement, that being the torso. If Jazwares were to improve upon the torso articulation, I think the figures of the Spartan Collection would absolutely be considered some of the best figures you can get for around $20 articulation wise, especially since every other area of their bodies already have great range and articulation. When it comes to visual presentation, Jazwares consistently does a good job at making the figures look good, but like anything, there's always room for improvement. As far as sculpt work goes, I really don't have anything to say. Jazwares does sculpt and get down as much details as possible, and where I could find room for improvement is in their paint work. During my time reviewing the Spartan Collection, I've noticed Jazwares is good at painting / capturing the larger details of whatever figure they release. Still, at times I noticed that Jazwares tends to leave out the smaller details in a figure's design. A great example that I have extensively covered is Halo 3 Master Chief. In that video, I go over every little detail Jazwares got down and missed. I just think if Jazwares just got down those finer and smaller details, even if we don't see them as much, it would really elevate the visual presentation of these figures, especially when we take that moment and really stop and stare at our figures. And if there was one last thing I can think of in the realm of paint work that I'd like to see, is some sort of black wash or panel lining done on these figures. Jazwares does such an amazing job sculpting their figures, but some of those smaller and finer details that they sculpt kind of get lost in the cleanness of these figures. I just feel some grit or panel lining would do a lot of good for these figures. It surely did for McFarlane's figures. So all in all, if Jazwares were to improve the torso articulation, paint some of those smaller, finer details that they choose to keep out, and apply some grit or panel lining to their figures on the Spartan Collection, I feel like we'd have some serious, sexy looking figures. So what I would like to see for the future of accessories in the Spartan Collection, there's a lot Jazwares could do here. When it comes to weapon revisions, I think there's only one weapon Jazwares hasn't scaled up yet, and that would be the Spartan Laser, which was released all the way back in Wave 1 with a cat. So it'd be really cool to see a Spartan Laser again that's properly in scale in the Spartan Collection, because it's really tiny for some reason. But revisions aside, another thing I'd like to see is more UNSC sidearms. One thing I've noticed throughout the Spartan Collection is that Jazwares loves reusing the reach design for the Magnum. We see this version of the Magnum with Jerome, Sarah Palmer, Combat Evolved Chief, and Halo 3 Chief, all characters from games that don't use the reach design of the Magnum. Don't get me wrong, Jazwares has tried to show some variation amongst these reach Magnums by giving them different paint jobs, but it'd be cool to see other models of Magnums or other UNSC sidearms that we see throughout the games. Like the sticky wait, we already got that. I mean, there's the target designator, but that's not really exciting. Okay, maybe there isn't really that many UNSC sidearms in the game, but more Magnum variation would be nice to see. And one thing that I would love to see from Jazwares is weapon packs, similar to how McFarlane did it back in the day. Most figures come with 2 weapons, and with 4 figures a wave, that's 8 weapons at least, and sometimes we already get weapons we've seen prior, so the window of opportunity for new weapons is small at times. So a way that Jazwares can give us more weapons per wave is through weapon packs, whether they do it through faction-based weapon packs or just a variety pack that changes per wave. Either way, I think weapon packs would be a great way to give us more and new interesting weapons per wave. Now, the last thing I'd like to see, and this might be my most bitchy take / request, but I'd like to see the correct version of weapons come with whatever figures they release with. What I mean by this is if Jazwares releases a Halo 3 figure, I'd like to see them come with Halo 3 weapons. A good example of this is with Halo 3 Chief. That figure does come with a battle rifle and Magnum, 2 weapons that we do see in Halo 3, but the battle rifle and Magnum that come with Halo 3 Chief are from different games. The battle rifle being from Halo 2 Anniversary and Infinite, whereas the Magnum, of course, has the Reach model, because of course it does. I would have found it cool if Jazwares just gave us Halo 3 models of those weapons with our Halo 3 figure. I feel like this change would help add to the Spartan Collection's weapon portfolio. I understand it's easier and it saves time / resources to reuse models you already have, but I always just find it exciting when Jazwares expands its weapon portfolio and gives us new weapons to use in the Spartan Collection. So in all honesty, when it comes to figure predictions, I have no idea what we could possibly get for the nameless Spartans that we see every now and then. All we do know is that they're going to have either lore accurate armor or fracture event armor with some random weapons. Unless it's a fracture figure, then Jazwares is sure to give those figures accessories that fit the theme of said figure. But when it does come to named figures and characters that we have seen throughout the games or in other Halo media, we know Jazwares likes doing teams such as Noble Team and the recently completed Blue Team. I would say Red Team, but Jazwares is holding off on Douglas right now for whatever reason. But since we've technically wrapped up 2 teams, I'm still looking at you, Douglas. I think Jazwares is going to start working on a new team, and honestly, I think there are 3 possible teams Jazwares would be interested in doing. The first team I think Jazwares would be interested in doing is Silver Team from the Halo show. With the 2nd season of the Halo show being the latest piece of Halo media at the moment, I think it would make sense for Jazwares to jump onto the Halo show hype train, but only time will tell, obviously. And while talking about these releases or potential releases, I want to have a little bit of fun and talk about how I personally would handle the release of these figures. So starting off with Master Chief, I'd have him come with an assault rifle using the Reach model, since that's what they're using in the show, well, at least in the 2nd season. And for a secondary, I'd give him a Magnum based off of the Reach model as well, and I would include a swappable head because, you know, that show just loves showing his face. Up next, we have Vanek 134. For his weaponry, I'd give him a shotgun based off the Reach model, since that's what the show uses as well. And then for a secondary, I'd also just give him a Magnum. And then just like with Chief, he gets a swappable head. And then we have Riz 028. For her weaponry, we usually see her with 2 Magnums throughout most of the show. So obviously, I'm going to give her 2 Magnums to dual wield. But as for her primary, I'd give her something like a battle rifle or the bandit rifle. That would be cool to see, since the DMR in the Halo show has no optics. But just like Chief and Vanek, Riz would also come with a swappable head. And then finally, we have Kai 125. Since she's the sniper of the team, obviously for for her primary, she'd get a sniper rifle, but it'd be based off of the Reach model since that's what the show uses as well. And as for her secondary, I'd actually give her the Needler because in the show she states that this is her favorite Covenant weapon. Not only would this be a nice show of attention to detail, but it would finally give us a reason to have the Needler be introduced into the Spartan Collection, which many people, including myself, have been wanting to see for a while now. And surprise, surprise, I'd also include a swappable head. And as for the magnums included with the Chief, Vanek, and Riz, they'd all be based off the Reach model since that's what the show uses. And I'm trying hard not to make any jokes, seeing I just bitched about Jazwares' overuse of the Reach Magnum. And then for our second team I can see realistically coming to the Spartan Collection is Fireteam Osiris. The reason I believe that we might get this team is because they're the last team of Spartans that we've seen in game that Jazwares hasn't done. Unless you want to count Fireteam Majestic as well, but the only reason I don't really count them is because we only saw them in cutscenes in Halo 4. And just like with Silver Team, I'm going to go over how I personally would handle these releases. And starting off with their selection of weaponry, I'm going to base it off of their campaign loadouts, except for one figure. But obviously every figure would have their weapons based off of their Halo 5 models. So starting off with Locke himself, for his primary he'd get a battle rifle, and as for his secondary he'd get a Magnum. Then for Vale, her primary would be an SMG, and as for her secondary, she would get a plasma pistol. And then when we get to our boy Buck, Buck's primary would be an assault rifle, and as for his secondary, he would come with a Magnum, but it would be the Magnum that we see him hold in that one cutscene in the campaign for Halo 5. In multiplayer, this Magnum is known as the Gunfighter Magnum. And lastly, he'd be able to unsheath the knife that you see him wear on his armor, because I thought that was such a cool feature that we saw with the releases of Noble Team, and I was kind of bummed that we weren't able to with the release of Fred in Wave 7. And then for our final member of Fireteam Osiris, Tanaka, her primary would be a DMR, and as for her secondary, she would come with a standard Magnum. And I would have all releases of Fireteam Osiris come with swappable heads as well. And then for the last team I can see realistically coming to the Spartan Collection is the Lone Wolves that we saw introduced in Season 2 of Halo Infinite's multiplayer. And the reason why I feel like we're going to get to see these characters enter the Spartan Collection at some point is because of how close they are to Commander Agrina in the narrative, and we just got a figure of her in the last wave, so it kind of makes sense, at least in my opinion. And honestly, because there's only 2 of them, Jazwares could turn their potential releases into a 2-pack, but 2-pack are not how I would handle their releases. Starting off with Hieu, for his primary I'd give him the Bandit Rifle since he's the Spartan that gives you to it in game, and then as for his secondary I just give him a sidekick. And as for Sigrid, her primary would be an Assault Rifle, but it would have the same paint job as the assault rifle she holds in that one cutscene. And as for her secondary, I'd also just give her a sidekick. And of course, because we've seen these characters' faces, I would throw in some swappable heads as well. And then there's one last figure I believe that we might get at some point in the Spartan Collection, and this figure is actually an elite figure, and that would be Arbiter in his silver armor. Whether it's Halo 2 Anniversary or 3's version, it doesn't matter. I just believe at some point we are going to get Arbiter in his silver armor, and I believe this makes sense because we've already gotten an Arbiter figure in the Spartan Collection, and that was based on his appearance in Halo 5, which was a solid design, but I'm sure that figure sparked the want from many fans like myself to want a silver armored Arbiter. So now the only question is, how would I personally handle this release? And obviously this would be a deluxe figure since it's an elite, but because of that deluxe factor, for shits and giggles, I'm going to throw in a third weapon since we would already be paying extra for this figure. So the 3 weapons that I am going to go for here are the Plasma Rifle, the Carbine, and the Energy Sword. And now this would be the part where I go over how these weapons have different designs in Halo 2 Anniversary and Halo 3 and just be a total nerd. But if we're being completely realistic here, Jazwares likes using the latest and greatest versions of things, so I'm going to base this figure off of the Halo 2 Anniversary models and all that jazz. And that's really all I've got for figure predictions, or at least figures that are realistic to expect in the Spartan Collection. And if I'm being honest, if I'm wrong about any of these predictions, whatever, it is what it is. But if I'm right, I'm not going to be mad. Despite the media that Silver Team is from and that Fireteam Osiris is from, I don't mind their designs. I think there's some pretty cool looking Spartans. So with all that said, we can move on to the next segment. So as I mentioned before, I believe every character that I mentioned in the prediction segment is someone who I deem most likely / realistic to be made into the Spartan Collection, but in this segment I'm gonna allow myself to be a little unhinged and discuss some figures I would love to see enter the Spartan Collection. And because I think about the Spartan Collection probably more than I should, if you thought the prediction segment was lengthy, you have no idea what you're about to witness. So let's start things off with a team, and the first team I'd like to see Jazwares release is the Halo 5 versions of Blue Team. We already have Halo 5 Chief, so Jazwares has technically already got their foot in the door. They just have to release the other 3 members, of course. And when it comes to how I would personally handle these releases, when it comes to the weapon selection of Linda and Kelly, I wouldn't have to change their primary since we already saw the correct models of their weapons released with their Gen 3 releases. The only thing is, instead of giving them sidekicks, they would have Halo 5 Magnums. And when it comes to Fred, obviously for his secondary, he would get a Halo 5 Magnum as well. But for his primary, I wouldn't just give him a standard DMR like the one that we saw with the Gen 3 release. Instead, I'd give Fred this short-barreled variant of the DMR that we see him use in the campaign of Halo 5. This would be a nice show of attention to detail and add some value to Fred accessory-wise, seeing that Kelly and Linda get their own special weapon. And while on the topic of Blue Team, another version of Blue Team I'd like to see is their appearances from Halo Legends The Package. Now when I say Blue Team, I just mean Chief, Kelly, and Fred. I already know this request is far-fetched as it is, but I'm not going to ask Jazwares to make a figure for every Spartan that we saw in that short. And I also do understand that the designs of the Gen 3 versions of Kelly and Fred took heavy inspiration from their designs in the package, but I still feel like there's enough visually and accessory-wise to make these figures different from what we already have. But going into how I would personally handle these releases, one thing I do want to make clear is every weapon would be based off of their Halo 3 counterpart, since that is what the short does go for. So starting off with the most unique figure of the bunch, and that would be Chief himself. For his primary, I would give him an assault rifle, and as for his secondaries, I would give him 2 SMGs. And then moving over to Kelly, I would give her a shotgun for her primary, and then 2 plasma rifles for her secondaries, since she's shown dual wielding them in the short. And then finally moving on to Fred, for his primary, I would give him a Spartan laser, and then 2 SMGs for his secondaries, just to keep up with the dual wielding trend here. And unlike the current release of Fred, I would make it so the knives in his shoulders do come out, and you can use them however you want, because that was one thing a lot of people, including myself, were bummed out about with this current release, that the knives were just kind of decoration rather than also being accessories. So shifting away from the theme of Blue Team and more into the theme of Halo Legends, 2 figures I would love to see are Daisy 023 from Homecoming and Cal 141 from the Babysitter. These 2 figures do have cult followings, but I still feel like they don't get the same amount of love that they got when Halo Legends first came out. So I think bringing them into the Spartan Collection would help bring back some of that love. Plus, I'm a nerd who wants more Halo Legends figures, so please, Jazwares. So getting into how I would personally handle these releases, starting off with Daisy 023, both of her weapons would be based off of their Halo 3 counterparts, since that's what the short goes for. But for her primary, she would get an assault rifle and then a Magnum for her secondary. And then when it comes to Cal 141, her loadout is a little funky since both of her weapons are from 2 different games, so you're just gonna have to bear with me here. For her primary, she would get an assault rifle, but based off the CE version, since that's the model of assault rifle the short uses. And then for her secondary, she would get a sniper rifle, but based off of the Halo 3 model, since that's also what the short uses. And since we see both of these characters' faces in their respected shorts, I would obviously throw in swappable heads. Whether they'd be anime heads or realistic looking heads, I don't know. That is up for you to imagine in your brain. So moving away from the Halo Legends theme and onto just other Spartans that I want to see enter the Spartan Collection, I would love to see Omega Team. Seeing they recently just made a comeback with content update 29 for Halo Infinite, I think it just makes sense to see this team enter the Spartan Collection. And when it comes to Omega Team, there are 2 possible ways Jazwares can handle their releases. Option A being that they base their appearances off of their Halo Wars 2 designs, where they're all built like brick shit houses, or option B being their more slimmed down designs that we see in Halo Infinite. But since this segment of the video is about me nerding the fuck out, I'm gonna go over both hypothetical versions of each team member. Starting off with August 099, for her Halo Wars 2 version, her primary would be a railgun, and then for her secondary, she would receive a Magnum, but it would be based off of the Halo 2 anniversary design, since that's what Halo Wars 2 uses as well for their Magnum. Then for August's Infinite version, her primary primary would be an assault rifle based off of the C model, since it technically makes a return in Infinite. Yes, I'm aware it's just the Infinite assault rifle with a Halo Combat Evolved skin over it. Then for her secondary, she would receive a sidekick because this is still a Halo Infinite figure. Then moving on to Robert 025, his Halo Wars 2 release would come with a banished plasma turret, since that's the weapon he uses in game, and then he would receive a magnum for his secondary. Then for Robert's Infinite release, his primary would be a scrap cannon, not only because he holds it in the promo art, but also because it would be cool to finally see that weapon enter the Spartan Collection, and then his secondary would be a sidekick as well. And then finally we have Leon 011. As for his Halo Wars 2 release, I'd give him an energy sword for his primary, and then of course a magnum for the secondary. And then for his Infinite release, he still gets a energy sword for his primary. The only thing that changes is now his secondary is a sidekick. Now, if you think all those previous requests were far-fetched or unrealistic, just wait till the shit you're about to hear. Alpha 9. I want to see Alpha 9 in the Spartan Collection. I mean, their player models are the same height as a Spartan, so scaling shouldn't be an issue. If you couldn't tell by my Spartan, I love ODSTs, so I'd be down for Alpha 9 in the Spartan Collection any day, anytime. So getting into how I would personally handle the releases, starting off with the rookie, he would get a suppressed SMG for his primary, and then a suppressed magnum for his secondary. Up next we have Buck. He would have an assault rifle for his primary, and then a suppressed magnum for his secondary, and then you'd also be able to unsheath the knife that you see him have on his armor. Then we have Dutch. His primary would consist of a Spartan laser, and his secondary would be a suppressed SMG. Then with Mickey, his primary would be a rocket launcher, and his secondary would be a suppressed SMG as well. And then for our boy Romeo, he would have a sniper rifle for his primary, and then a suppressed magnum for his secondary. And finally we have Dare. Her primary is a suppressed SMG, and then a suppressed magnum for her secondary. And of course, every figure's weapon would be based off of their Halo 3 counterpart. And for every member of Alpha 9 except Rookie, they would come with a swappable head. Now, if that's too much, or if it strays too far from the theme of the Spartan Collection, Jazwares could give us the Spartan 4 versions of Alpha 9. And when discussing how I would personally handle these releases, I already went over Buck in the prediction segment of the video when envisioning Fireteam Osiris, so I'm not going to discuss him here again. So going over how I would personally handle these releases, starting off with Dutch. Starting off with his primary, I would give him a Hydra, and we can see in the artwork that he's holding a Hydra based off of the Halo 5 model, so that's what model Hydra I would give him. And then for his secondary, I would give him a sidekick, because despite the model of Hydra that he's holding in his hands, his appearance is based off of the Mjolnir Gen 3, which is, you know, during the events of Infinite, technically making these figures Halo Infinite figures. And then for Mickey, he would get a Bulldog for his primary, and then a sidekick for his secondary as well. And then Romeo would get a sniper rifle for his primary, and then he would obviously get a sidekick for his secondary. And then finally, for the newest member of Alpha 9, we have Gretchen, Dutch's wife. Her loadout would consist of a commando for her primary, and then a sidekick for her secondary. So if the crew of Alpha 9 from Halo 3 ODST was too much and not exactly realistic for the Spartan Collection, then here's a more small, digestible, and Spartan-themed version of Alpha 9 that Jazwares could do. And that's pretty much every character that I want to see enter the Spartan Collection, at least every character that I can think of off the top of my head at the moment. And in all honesty, I don't think I'm going to see any of these figures enter the Spartan Collection. I wouldn't be surprised. Like I said, this list is very far-fetched and might be a little too ambitious for Jazwares, but I still think it would be really awesome to see these figures enter the Spartan Collection. Now, I do have a list of random armors or armor configurations I'd love to see enter the Spartan Collection via random nameless Spartans that Jazwares likes giving us every now and then, but if I went over that whole list, we'd be here forever, and this segment is already way longer than it needs to be. But just to name a few, I would love to see ODST armor enter the Spartan Collection. If you couldn't tell by my obsession of ODSTs already, I'd also love to see the Hayabusa enter the Spartan Collection, and with his katana, of course. And then I just want more Mark V, because I said so. It's a good looking armor. I love it. I want more of it. And if there is truly one last thing that I can think of that I want to see enter the Spartan Collection, it's more elites. I know that's a weird thing to say, but we've already gotten 2 in the Spartan Collection, so what's stopping Jazwares from making more? I don't care what order we'd start getting armor in, I just want more elites with the goal of eventually having every elite armor made. And if this request strays too far from the theme of the Spartan Collection, then for the love of fuck, Jazwares, make an elite series. You know how cool it would be to see, you know, other banished or covenant species in the scale of the Spartan Collection? But okay, I think I'm done ranting now. That's all the figures I want to see that Jazwares will probably never make. Well, that was a lot. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, I really do enjoy talking about the Spartan Collection. It might be due to the fact that this is like the first big Halo toy line that I can actually invest myself in and actually, you know, keep up with all the series or waves or whatever. Because even though I did grow up on McFarlane Halo, I wasn't really able to do that because I was a kid and a teenager who didn't really make a lot of money because I was young and dumb. And so I couldn't really keep up with all those figures despite having some. So with that being said, I do hope that Jazwares does continue to work on the Spartan Collection. It seems like with waves 7 and 8 they are trying to improve these figures for us, which is greatly appreciated. So hopefully with waves 9 and beyond, if that ever does happen, they, you know, continue to improve, you know, the figures, like the torso articulation and stuff like that, because if they really touch up on the things that I think they could touch up on, that like I mentioned earlier in the video, these can be some really good figures for the price that we do get them for. So again, Jazwares, keep up the great work. We see that you're improving these products for us. I think the only other thing I can ask from Jazwares is to actually communicate with the fan base a little better. It seems like they don't really like communicating with the Halo fan base, and whenever they do talk about Halo, it's way after they've released a wave or whatever. So hopefully in the future, whatever Jazwares is doing, they can, you know, talk to us and let us know what's going on, because fuck, I'm curious. So with all that being said, I really hope you all enjoyed today's video. I know I talked about a lot. This is really just kind of supposed to be a conversation piece for us, the Halo fans, and, you know, really get our brains, you know, going and thinking about what we really want to see in the Spartan Collection. So hopefully, again, you found this video enjoyable. If there's any things that you want to see Jazwares improve upon the figures, or anything you want to see from the accessories of the Spartan Collection, any figures you think that are coming to the Spartan Collection, or any figures you want to see come to the Spartan Collection, you're more than welcome to go down in the comment section below and let me know. I'll most likely reply to y'all's comments because I love talking about this stuff clearly. But if you did enjoy today's video, a like and subscription would be awesome. Don't worry about commenting, I get it, it's a lot of effort moving yo fingers. But if you do want to bounce off anything I did say throughout the video, you're more than welcome to. I'll most likely reply to y'all's comments because I obviously like talking about this stuff. And don't worry about the bell, we both know that shit is broken. And if you want to see more content like this, there's plenty of it up on the channel. I love talking about Halo whenever I can here. I also do Star Wars, Alien, and Predator content whenever I can. And so if that does interest you, you're more welcome to go check it out. And with that said, have a nice day and stay hydrated. It's important.